Kate Hasmanson came up with this great thing when we figured out all the different presentations that we're going to be having. There are famous elections at different levels, local, state, and within the league. So we're going to hear about our local election office renovations and election observer information. We're going to learn about declined sign effort with a state lobby team representative Cynthia Stewart. And we're also going to hear about the state league nominating committee for the board election that will happen at the state council in June from Tricia Grantham, who's on the state nominating committee. So first, let's start with the league's nonpartisan statement. The league shall not support or oppose any political party or any candidate. And we hold that here and we honor that while we're here at our league meetings and activities. So now I'm here to introduce a board member, and it's myself for this meeting. I'm Ellie Hutton, and I have been a member of the league since 2017. And that's not my first league experience, though. When I was a Girl Scout, I think I was a Cadet Scout, in our local town, there was a small league. And when they had candidate forums, they invited the Girl Scout troop to come and serve pie to all of the attendees. So that was my first experience with the league, was at a candidate forum in my little town in Western Massachusetts. Anyway, since I joined the league here in Clark County, I jumped right in pretty much with both feet. I joined in February and May at the annual meeting. They had a pretty small board. They were looking for people. I raised my hand and said, can I self-nominate? And they said yes. And I had a friend with me, and she said, oh, I'll second that. And they said, are you a member? And she pulled out her checkbook and wrote a check. Anyway, so I have, in addition to being on the board, I've been the roster manager, the membership chair. I have been involved in a number of league activities over the years, and I have really enjoyed all of them and getting to know people. So I'm an election observer. I've been active with the civics committee in the past, redistricting at the state level when they did the redistricting in 2021. Yes. I also have spent a lot of time looking at the national website, and I have years ago attended numerous webinars that they put on. They put on monthly DEI webinars. They have done a lot of community calls around voter rights, organizing, hearing what different states are doing. They still hold them, so go to the National League Management site and look at their event calendar for that. Anyway, I just want to say that I have really enjoyed being a league member. I've met a lot of wonderful people, going to lobby days, doing things here in our community. So I hope everyone will know that we lean on each other and we learn a lot from each other, and we get good advice on how to be able to do the things in the league that we want to do. So welcome to that. Edgar, is she here yet? Is she still in? Edgar, would you like to come up and talk? So Edgar's our first presenter today, and he's the chair of our elections observers, and she does an amazing job. We talk on the phone sometimes, and it's pretty fascinating. What I have learned is how much she communicates with, as in that role, communicates in a very official role with the elections office. Thank you, Edgar.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank those that are here and those that are listening in there. If you happen to be an observer, thank you very much. If you don't, if you're not an observer, you may want to consider doing it. I just learned today from somebody, an observer, who said, even not doing the ones that were super busy, but doing things that at the very end, when they're looking at ballots that may or may not be passed as a official, as a ballot, for the signature or doing, looking at all kinds of other things that they're learning all kinds of things about elections. So, first of all, I want to tell you that under 35% of the voters have voted. So I go to everyone when they release the votes. And this is why they go, and you can get it online, you can get it as well. But I get this information, and so far, just for your information, it doesn't seem to be anyone that race voters on very close that will have to be recounted. That said, the elections, as he said, are very safe. And that's one of our jobs as election observers, to make certain that that is true. And we then look at all aspects. So we don't talk with the people while we are observing unless we have a question. And they have made it so there's different lanyards that we're wearing. And we did get to make certain that our lanyard was purple. And so we gave us kind of a line break, and I said, that doesn't sound good. But we only talk to those that are the head or the ones that are very much involved over it all. And then I have the observers write a report, and I give them a report form that changes depending on the election. And so some of you may know that elections went through a huge reconstruction. And when you ever got into the election office, you knew you could also go and register your car. That can't be because it took over that whole floor. And so now they have a huge area that's very good for their process on that one. So we go there and we watch what they're doing, and if we have any problems right away, we then check with some of the black lanyard, and there's only 5 of them. But otherwise, with the report, they let me know that what went well or something they have questions, and I do a follow up on it. I just want to say that what we do is so very important, especially now, when people are liking to say that elections are not safe, or elections should be somewhere where someone just goes and has to be there physically and be able to fill out their ballot. And anyone else, if they mail it in or they drop it in drop boxes, it's not safe, which is totally wrong. It's actually even safer. They also have different ways of looking at ballots. So for instance, before elections, they choose one race and they pick 600 ballots. They do not choose them on their own. For instance, we do too. There's a place that has maybe 8 different things that hold the ballots in one race. And we just say, that one, the middle ones, and they count out 600, it runs through, and then they separate them out. And then the day after elections, they do a physical count. So for some of you who are curious about this, most of the time, the physical count and what I'm running through is the same. But if there's any mistakes, can you guess which one it is?
The hand count.
The hand count, that's correct. Physical count. And so they have to do it over and over again until they find out. And they don't tell them. The people that are doing the count have no idea what the numbers are going to be. And then they find that out. So again, it's safe. Does anybody have any questions of me? No? Well, if you want to go and be part of this process, just let us know. And you have to go, by the way, you have to go through a training. So that's the only thing. And they do have trainings. They've already listed the ones in January and June. And they're having the morning ones are full, but they have spaces that open up and have afternoon ones now too. And there'll be a third one later on. But it's always worth your while if you want to observe just once or you observe many times. Thank you. Question.
I do have a question. Can people hear me? My question for Edric is, was there any incidences of people lingering at the ballot boxes in any of the drop boxes in town?
Not that I know, of, so I can't tell you yes or no. I don't see that. We do get the, schedules for when they're going to pick up the ballots. And I could put that out for our observers, but we have just a little over 40 and not all of us observe at many times. If you don't observe for like years, I finally drop you off because I realize you're not going to be observing, but, we can, and I asked a question if anybody wants to do it, because we do have a schedule, and, we can go to that. I do, on election night, the only thing I do is watch the ballots coming back in with a different group, so I stand in the garage, whether it's warm out or cold or rainy, and watch them as they bring it in, and then go through the process, and then watch when they bring it into the building afterwards, and they'll sort it out, just to get ready for the process the next day. Any other questions? Yes.
Just wondering, do you anticipate a need for more observers and more helpers when we get into the important elections coming up next year?
Well, all elections are very important, so if you're talking about the ones that are more nationally focused. So yes, I do, and you have to go through the process. If you haven't gone through it yet, you have to do it. I can't use you until you have done that. And it's very important because of certain things that we can and cannot do, and we should know that as well as understand the process itself. And one of the major things is talking to each other while we are in those areas. But we do, if you have somebody you want to talk to, and it's not someone wearing a black lanyard, you can go in the hallway and talk to them there. Yes.
How many other counties besides Clark County allow League of Women Voters to have observers? Because most of them, it's just Democrat and Republican. Do you know the count?
I don't know the number, but there is a thing in the, I'm not sure it's a law or it's a WAC, but anyway, that it can be a nonpartisan group, so, that's really up to that league group. And then to the elections at that, in that area, so, but yes. Well, there's actually not very many of us, and I can't tell you what they do in other, states, I really don't know. But we are one of the ones that, we have a really good relationship with the elections office, including Greg as well. And, multiple times, if there's any issues, I have no problem going in and asking and talking about it. And we actually have helped different ways of the setup and some other things too, by talking with them, sharing what we're seeing. And a good example is, when the people that are now doing the observing, and they go in and see the differences, there's multiple things when you're observing is a little bit easier now. Is because some of the suggestions that we made. Examples, resolutions, so many here are observers. Okay, so you know what resolutions are, it's after ballots go through the process and they still have some issues, like you've written in paint, or now, there are now people doing sparkly ink. So I mean, that has to be going through resolutions, or there's times of giving where someone has marked more than 2 items on the ballot for one race. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And so they initially had put it behind this kind of metal fence with this one thing. I'm like, whoa, this is not gonna work well for us. And we talked about it. And so now those that observe, and that's the first time, and now see the second one, we have 2 great big screens, like TV screens, outside of the metal casing, and we can hear what the people are doing and talking, which is a huge change from the old system where they were behind a glass wall. And it took us a long time to even get so we could hear what they were saying. So they listened to us because we don't ask for things that are not doable, but we have good input. So I appreciate all my observers when they fill out their reports and anything that they have to share that they think should be changed or what they like about it. It doesn't just stay with me. If I think it's important, I will carry it on into for the people that are like Rich, who is the head of it, or anyone else that would be pertinent to. Anything else? Well, again, thank you for everybody who did vote. It's really important, and remember, the turnout was terrible. And over 50% of the races didn't have anybody running.
All right, well, to end this like happy note though, Edgar, I just wanna acknowledge you and thank you for everything you do for organizing the servers. Edgar's extremely communicative and, you know, just creates a topic where everyone feels like they can really be engaged. So just round of applause for you, Edgar, and what you do. And let's see, do we have somebody out yet?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think we'll move to our next speaker. And so keeping with our theme of, you know, we started out locally here with our elections, now moving on to some issues that affect state elections, in particular the Decline to Sign initiative, the proposed initiative that some people explained that would make it more difficult in the league's view for eligible voters to register and maintain their registration. And want to introduce Cynthia, just I think, you know, as you probably know, she is our first vice president for the League of Women Voters Washington, and she's going to provide us with an overview of this initiative, and then our very own Janet in the top is going to lead us in a Q&A on this. So as you're listening to Cynthia's presentation and looking at the slides you have up, please do be thinking about any questions. And I'd like to challenge us all to think about how we might be working on this in Park County. So right now we're in that Decline to Sign phase of this initiative, but if it does get on the ballot, we'll be thinking about how we can educate voters regarding the potential impacts of it. So, you know, we all live here and know what resonates with our neighbors. And so as you're listening to the presentation, just be thinking about how we might work on this locally and any questions you have for Cynthia. And just as we haven't acknowledged the folks online yet, just want to say a hello to you. It looks like we have 9 folks online, including some new people, maybe some visitors. So a big welcome to you. And of course, welcome to any new members and visitors who are joining us. After this presentation, we'll have a little chance to do some discussion in small groups. But for now, I'd like you to turn your attention to Cynthia.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Again, my name is Cynthia Stewart. My charge on the board of the league, the state board, is to be the advocacy director. I'm the chair of the lobby team, which is kind of a subset of that, but it's the advocacy director role that I'm taking in this particular case. I'd like to share my screen. First, I better get this up so that I can share it. So hold on. Sorry for that delay. Oops. Yeah, I have permission. I just can't seem to find the document here. Give me 1 second. I apologize. It's not coming up as it should. This is very strange. I don't usually have this problem. Okay, come on. Oh, here we go. Finally. Okay. All right. So, are you able to see that?
Yes. Can you make it a little bigger?
I'm going to go to the slideshow presentation here.
Okay.
If I can, there. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Can you all see that? Okay. Thank you. So, the topic today is this initiative that has been filed with the Secretary of State, and there are petition gatherers collecting signatures for this petition. And I'll talk a little bit more later about how many signatures they have to get and the timing and so forth. but the point of this particular action, excuse me, is that there's a group of people who really want to reduce the number of voters in Washington. And what this particular initiative would do if it's passed on the ballot in 2026 would be to require proof of citizenship, not only for new voters, but also for those who are already registered. And that would be quite a challenge to our system and really unfair to a lot of voters. So basically, voting is really the keystone, the rock solid piece of our democracy. If we don't vote, we don't have a democracy. And so we want our systems to be safe and secure. We want our systems to be as protected as possible, but we also want to make sure that as many people as possible can actually register and vote. So in Washington, we do have a safe and secure system. There is absolutely no evidence of any widespread fraud or anything that has ever impacted any outcomes on the ballot in Washington state. And there are a lot of tools and processes to investigate when something is assumed to be a fraudulent vote or a fraudulent registration. Non-citizen voting is rare all over the country, but in Washington state in particular, very, very low. Almost nothing has ever happened here. And I've given you a couple of links here that when you get the copy of this PowerPoint later, you can look these up if you want to. If somebody is found to be registered fraudulently, they can be put into prison and they can risk deportation if they're a non-citizen. So the stakes are pretty high to anybody who would consider trying this inappropriately. So, however, the federal administration, as you know, has already signed, the president has signed some executive orders that really are intended to reduce the number of voters in the country. And in support of that, the state senator, who is also the chair of the Republican Party, has initiated this initiative, and it's being supported by some people with a lot of wealth. So the campaign that they're starting will be aggressive more than it has been. I think they were waiting until the election to get very assertive about this. We have seen, however, a number of signature gatherers and the numbers increasing. So it's going to get far more aggressive now that the current election is over. So what this would do is it would require all voters to have either an enhanced driver's license or to come in person and provide documentary proof of citizenship. It can be a birth certificate, it can be a passport, which means that you've already submitted that. It can be any documentation that assures that you actually are a citizen, or it can be citizenship papers if you've gone through the citizenship process. Now, what it also requires is current voters to do this. So what will happen is when people are, if this passes, what will happen is that auditors will be required to cross-reference the voter rolls against the people who have enhanced driver's licenses. Anybody who is not documented as having that enhanced driver's license will have to come in and provide this proof of citizenship. And there are only 32% of Washington drivers have that. And so what that means is a lot of people would be at risk of losing their right to vote. And that is current people. That is not necessarily new people who are registering from that point on. There also would be a time limit that says if you want to vote in 2027, you have to have done this by a certain point in time. So it's very, very challenging for people who have changed their names, who have lost their paperwork or whatever. They can't find it or they don't have access to it. What will happen is if they get 309,000 signatures by January 2nd, this will then go to the legislature. The actual official title of this is IL 26, meaning initiative to the legislature 26 dash I 126 means initiative 126 going to the legislature. So if that happens, the legislature has three choices. One of them is they can adopt it as proposed in the initiative. Just take the initiative and pass it as law. The second thing they can do is they don't do anything with it. It will then automatically go on the ballot in November 26th. And then the other option is to have an alternative measure that would be something different than this initiative that would also go on the ballot. So then the voters would have two options to choose from. In any case, this will land up on the ballot. So if it gets that many signatures. What it would require again is this enhanced driver's license. And basically what we have now is a check thing that says that I'm a citizen, I'm entitled to vote and that kind of thing. And so as I mentioned earlier, people would have to go in person and provide documentation if they don't have that enhanced driver's license. And so again, I want to reinforce this is not just for new people. This is for people currently registered to vote. So what happens then is the auditor's office would notify people. They would be given a time-specific limit on when they could come in, or they would be removed from the polls. So this would have a lot of impact on our system. Number one, eligible voters would be burdened with having to go through this process. And a lot of people can't find their documentation, so they might be very much at risk of losing their right to vote. Secondly, the county auditors will have a lot of extra processes to go through. It would be time consuming, it would be costly for them, and so forth. And then as I continue to re-emphasize, it will disenfranchise a significant number of people. I want to speak just briefly about the auditors. We've been asking each county, every league, to ask their county auditors for data. So far, we have only one county that has submitted any idea of what it might cost for them. We have a couple that have said we have no way of estimating this. But if you just think about it, the cost of implementing this would be reasonably high. And so we're hoping that some auditors can actually calculate what it might involve. So I ended up with a duplicate slide there. So for some reason, I'm having trouble seeing my own slide here on the caption. So non-citizen voting, again, it's not happening. And so there are a lot of lies being told about this all across the country, stimulated by the president's interest in having fewer voters. The scientific evidence is that this is not happening. And the Brennan Center for Justice found only 30 cases of non-citizens out of 23.5 million votes cast. And so that's an incident rate of like 1,000% of the votes cast. And so the federal law is very strict, and it has been a crime for over 30 years to risk doing something, fraudulently like that. It's not to anybody's advantage to try that. So we also have state laws that are against non-documented people voting, and people are watching for that all the time. There are some procedures that have to be followed, and there are state statutes that lay that out. Also, it's important to know that, again, the federal administration is trying to stop mail-in voting. And mail-in voting is going to be the next phase of this whole set of activities. And we know that mail-in voting is safe and has been tested many times. Now, we found data that says it's been successfully used for over 150 years. And one person was questioning how that can be. It actually started with what we currently have as well, which is military people who are out of the area where they're registered to vote could mail in ballots. So absentee ballots, mail-in ballots for military. That's been going on. I actually found documentation in this article that I've quoted there of back in the 1700s, this started. So It's a longstanding practice. It hasn't been questioned until now. And so just to know that not just Washington, but most states have a lot of protection against this. So why is this less of a threat than some other issues? Mis and disinformation is a much bigger threat to our election security. Because of the false news that goes out, the rumors, the lies, frankly, conspiracy theories are rampant in the fake news category. We have this echo chamber going on among politics, different parties saying over and over and over again the same thing. And the whole concept is the more you say it, the more people believe it, whether or not it's true. And then just constantly online manipulation of information. Now, why is the League, in addition to the fact that we have a mission of empowering voters, we also have positions that relate to this, that we should serve the voter with maximum of convenience, simplicity, and efficiency. If this initiative passes, it would certainly be contrary to that. And then secondly, permanent personal registration should be continued and so forth. So we should not have to go back and revisit somebody's registration later. So what we're asking League members to do is to get out and promote the decline to sign message during this petition signature drive. So between now and January 2nd, if you see if you have an opportunity to promulgate the message, do not sign this petition, please do that. You can even do it next to tabling of other sorts. So this is one case where we do not have to separate the voter services issues from this, because this is a voter service issue itself. Secondly, you can help by, as I mentioned earlier, getting information from your county auditor. What actually are the impacts in terms of their business that they do, and how much might it cost? The League can also help by continuing to register voters and making sure that we get as many people registered to vote as we can, and then hold ballot issue forums. Now, this is a weird time of year to have a ballot issue forum, but you could do it. So it's weird because we just had an election, but this is going to January 2nd. It's a very strange time of year for anything like that. But public information is critical in this case, letting people know what the stakes are and why it's really important for them not to sign. If they get those signatures and they get enough by January 2nd, it's going on the ballot. And that is a scary proposition. So I've listed a couple of resources here for you. I've sent this PowerPoint to your League so you can post it and look at it. So I want to stop sharing right now and see what kind of questions you have. I want to also point out that I'm having real trouble hearing speakers from you. And so I'll try to watch the transcript and make sure that I understand what your questions are. So I hope that was informative for you, and I hope that you will be interested in helping to decline to sign and see if we can get this thing stopped. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Do we have any questions?
Any questions?
Thank
Yes.
you.
Are there any questions? She's asking.
Can you use this one? Thanks, Cynthia. And Janet, do you want to put this moderate Q&A or?
I'm sorry.
So we have a few questions for you in the room. We'll pass the mic around and just let us know if you need the question repeated.
Has League done any research on what it would cost each individual to get the documentation that they needed? Because that's something I think we could bring up next to if we have a decline to sign, is to tell people, you'll have to get a copy of your birth certificate. You'll have to get, this documentation and this one and this one and this one. And so, household with, 2 or 3 or 4 people
what would that amount to? Versus the enhanced driver's license, which itself is quite costly.
So I think the enhanced driver's license is, I forgot to look that up, I'm sorry, but I think it's about $75. Now, in terms of in terms of people's cost to get their documentation, it's so variable because there's so many different ways that somebody might have lost it or have to go get it. So I haven't seen or heard any data about what it would cost an individual to do that. What we know though is that a lot of people don't know how to go about finding it. So it's that gap in information that's the biggest issue of all, I think. I think a lot of people don't even know how to get their birth certificate. So maybe after, if this goes on the ballot, we will have to do another whole campaign having to do with what you have to do to get your documentation. And do not vote for this thing because it's going to be impossible. So we're in phase one, which is trying to get people not to sign the petition so it won't go on the ballot. Phase two will be if they get that number of signatures, then we will have another whole campaign before November 26th to get people to vote against it.
I'm a guy who's the coordinator for for the election observer. Can you hear me?
I'm trying to watch the transcript.
Okay, so I would like to have all the specifics that you would like to get from our elections, from Greg Kinsey and also the supervisor for elections. I will get that information for you, but I want to just like all the points, including not only what they have to do, but what the observers have to do. If there's a clean cut form, I can get that information to you.
I'm not sure I understand. What you're asking is what do we want to get from the auditor's office? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, that's right. I was looking at the transcript and it had some interesting interpretations of what Edry was saying. So that is Edry's offering to help you, if you can give her the precise information that you need from the auditor's office. Looks like it's messing up my words too.
I think what I'd like to do is send something out in kind of a newsletter form about what to ask the auditor's office rather than trying to recite it right here. Generally, it is what kinds of processes would this add to your office? In terms of timing, what would that require and how much extra cost would that involve? That's the main gist of it. But I can write something down and send it to you so that you all
I
have
would like to have the whole part, and also the auditor's office, the people that are ahead of elections, get phone calls, emails from voters and soon-to-be voters. And I like to have that as well, so they see the whole thing, because then they may look at what your questions are and may add something else to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. And I will get something out very soon.
Thanks, Cynthia. And we'll have minutes of all this, so, you know, we can make sure that we're getting our exact requests to you.
Thank you.
We have a couple more questions in the room, I think.
Hi, Cynthia, this is Cynthia Gardner, lead member. Can the legislature make a decision not to send this forward once it gets to them, or are they obligated that once the petition reaches them, that they have to put it to the voter? In other words, could they vote against it once it reaches the legislature?
The state law requires that a petition that has enough signatures to go to the legislature will automatically be put on the ballot in one form or another. Either the legislature does nothing and it goes on the ballot, or the legislature has an alternative. In your case, you were asking about voting against it. Well, they can vote against it, but it won't change anything. That whatever form that takes, it would also go on the ballot. So then you have two things. And then the third option is they create another whole thing and it goes on the ballot. So however we look at it, it's automatically on the ballot if they get enough signatures to get it to the legislature in the first place. And that's why the decline to sign is so important. That's the only thing that would really stop this.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions from folks online? You can either unmute or put them in the chat.
Questions from online folks?
You, maybe you've unmuted, but did you have a question? Okay. Any other questions or comments from the room? We will have just a couple of minutes, after we say goodbye to Cynthia, just to have a little discussion, like again, around how we might be thinking about this for Clark County. So 2 more questions in the room.
Thanks. Thank you, Cynthia. You mentioned that there's some wealthy, backers, thank you, of this, campaign. Are they in consumer products? Do they own consumer products industries? Can we boycott them? I mean, who are these people?
Well, mostly, I don't know. I can get the names for you after I go to the Public Disclosure Commission and look them up. But they're the same people that have been floating these initiatives for the last few years. It's people with wealth, and I don't associate them with particular products. I don't know necessarily what companies they represent, or if they're just independently wealthy. But there are a number of very wealthy people in this state who are very conservative, who are MAGA supporters, who really want to do what the president's asking them to do. And so every year lately, we've had something on the ballot from this bunch. And this is just the latest. And I can get those names out to you also if you're interested in having those specifics.
Thank you.
Part of my problem today is I don't keep this stuff in my head and I have to go look it up. So not knowing what your questions are in advance makes me look like I'm not knowledgeable. I will get that out to you though.
Okay. All right, well, it looks like that was all the questions we had. So thank you very much, Cynthia, for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to explain that and helping us.
Thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it. And I hope that you will become very active on this matter because it's critical. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And then as I mentioned, I wanted to have just a couple of minutes for us to, I thought it would be, easier to have this conversation kind of in the room about what we're thinking might resonate with voters in Clark County around decline to sign. If there's anything that we just want to like bring up amongst our membership for what to do with this. Like every, that's great that you outlined what you would find helpful as the person who has probably some of the closest connections with elections for getting this information in order to help the state with this initiative. But yeah, anything that folks want to share just with our local league around your thoughts, what's going through your head as you're listening to Cynthia and thinking about how this initiative may or may not resonate with your friends.
I'm wondering if there's a way that the league can organize a neighborhood canvas or something so that we can pass these flyers out in our neighborhood. Kind of engage our neighbors to pass out flyers.
I'll just like kind of do, round robin and folks can react to what other people have said.
Not a suggestion, but a worry. With our low voter turnout, this is, I can think of so many reasons why people would say, why try, like money. I think it's I've tried to get some past birth certificates, it's very difficult. This, the cumbersomeness of this is a real worry for me.
Well, and our elections office handle all of the citizens of Clark County who show up in the No, I was just wondering if our elections office could even handle. If everybody in the county has to show up in person with ID, how and where are they even capable of doing physically?
Well. Thanks, Simon.
Getting that happens. Well, it's not everybody in the county. I think what Cynthia said, if you have an enhanced driver's license, that will be cross-referenced and you won't have to do anything. But if you haven't gotten one, you will have to either get one, I would guess, or go into the office and present the birth certificate that you still need for the enhanced, the driver's license, so. Yeah. And thank you. I couldn't remember the percentage, but yeah, only a third of the people have a enhanced driver's license, so. I would think it would be, kind of keep track of where anybody sees, people gathering the signatures. And then, I don't know what to do with that, but know where those people are that are getting the signature.
I know at the member orientation that we held this, in October, there were a couple who are new members who were talking about.
Oops. Too much. Audio problems.
Yeah, I turned it off because it's down. Okay. Anyway, they had seen, find a sign petition gatherers at the county fair. I didn't go to the county fair, so I didn't see it, but I have seen petition gatherers for other initiatives, but I haven't yet seen anyone for this one, so I have no idea if any of us have seen them.
I have not seen any, but often they go to libraries. The libraries will allow,
Petition gatherers in their lobby or right outside, like at the Furstenberg Center, they will allow it. So, so far, it's been a religious group that I avoid. So, but other than that, that's all I've seen. Oh, with somebody playing, I don't know, sketchy child thing.
yeah. I heard the Walmart.
Yeah.
Oh, Walmart.
All right, maybe just a couple more comments, over here, both people on the table.
If we think a little farther downstream, it's gonna be obvious not only to us, but also to the people who are supporting and funding this initiative. That all the local offices that have anything to do with election are gonna be overwhelmed. And at that point, they make the point the elections are not fair, not safe, whatever it is they want to say. It's more of a threat to democracy than just leaving some voters out of the process.
Could I offer another comment back to the place, the question about where the petitions are being circulated? What we've heard around the state is it's things like farmers markets, which are probably not apropos at this time of year, but farmers markets, any kind of gathering like that, sometimes in front of libraries. And we've also heard about people commenting in the public comment period of city council meetings without any relevance to the agenda on the city council. They just go and they talk about, this initiative and why people should sign it. So you might think about the converse of that would be league members go to city councils and say, we're really concerned about this. We want the constituents to know that they should not sign this petition. So it's another way of approaching it that you might want to consider.
Market after this, so I will double check and see if I can see anyone. But I just wanted to say, I think for something like this, compared that we reach out to some of our other social justice partners like LULAC and NAACP so that we can put on more of a united front in terms of like figuring out where we all need to be to get the message out.
Great, Janet.
beyond the cost, there's also the thought that once you have the documentation, you have to be able to show up at the elections office during the day, during a weekday, if you work, if you go to school, if you don't have transportation. So there's all that issues too for people, even if they have the documentation.
Okay, I just wanted to point out Cynthia's comment up there,
Okay, you go ahead and
That-
read it, okay.
references to the League of Women Voters of Washington.
Yeah, just like, okay, yeah, just a reminder to everyone, so Teresa, as you've been taking notes seriously over there, so we'll capture these great ideas and, I think we can, maybe the board can make some recommendations about, where we can take this as a league. There's been some good ideas shared today, and whether we end up doing that in the next couple of months or, increasing our efforts, assuming this does get on the ballot, we will continue to keep this issue front of mind. And Cynthia put a link in the chat, and I'll make sure that's in the notes, that has a PDF of the flyer that's on your tables, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint. His final thoughts from Eddie, I think you get the final word.
I would like to know in our state, in all states, what groups are opposing it and how are they doing it? Has the message getting out? Just think of our state and how we talking about being in Clark County or the areas around it. But look how many parts of our state have their population spread over a large area that may or may not be able to access it.
Great. Yeah, that's I think an important point to end on, and Cynthia, thanks for staying on to listen to our conversation. I know it's hard being remote and trying to hear what's in the room, but any final thoughts from you? If you don't want to have a last word, that's okay too, but just, yeah, thanks for listening in.
I just appreciate your conversation. Thank you again.
Thanks so much. You have a great day. So for the rest of us that are sticking around for our final hour of our meeting, I just want to give us a chance to get up, stretch, socialize a little bit. I see it. We didn't do snacks today. We're kind of alternating every other month. I think Mimi, did you bring the little treats? So there's some treats which you're implored to eat. And I think it'd be fun as like a little getting to know you kind of conversation at your tables. Something a bit lighter. We've had some heavier topics. Which is trying to decide. Maybe talk about upcoming plans for Thanksgiving, favorite Thanksgiving side dish is the question of the day. So just take 5 minutes, get to know the folks at your table. If you just have a couple people at your table, consolidate, because our next agenda item is going to be a table group discussion, and so we want maybe just like 4 or 5 people. So yeah, just like combine forces, and yeah, we'll come back in about 5 minutes. So get some treats and have a little chat with your table group.
So while we're doing this, I guess, feel free to talk amongst yourselves. I'm gonna go see if I can get a hold of Kate and get a clue as to what we're gonna be talking about later. So that, maybe we'll be ready to do that too from here.
Okay. I don't think I have everybody. She said there were 9.
There were, but now there are only 6.
Okay.
The 9 included. So there were 8.
Oh, okay, because I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I had 7.
Okay. Let's see.
But
There was a Kathy B.
Oh, okay.
That, she's the. And she's currently not here. She left.
The end. Thanks. Oh. Oh, Tricia's a guest. Okay. Yeah, Tricia's gonna talk a little bit later.
Okay, we're gonna take our places. I feel like conversation already going back to more serious topics, you know, folks are talking about declining society again. I didn't hear any mention the paper Thanksgiving side dishes, so I think we're ready to get to work again. So, yeah, just, go ahead and kind of fuel. And maybe, actually, well, yeah, I'll have to, anyway, I'll do one of the things to your table too, like you have your computer set up. So maybe Judy, your table is going to Teresa's table and bring the papers on your table. So this next part of our time together, so we're moving our theme to, the league, so elections at different level, looking at, you know, first local, state, and now like around the league. So one thing I think many of us are aware of is that the league always bases its action and advocacy on positions. These positions are derived from the studies that we do and agreed on through consensus process. And one thing that we have coming up, which all of you who are even the least bit interested in action advocacy should take a look at, is the November 15th action workshop, where the state league will be preparing us for the upcoming legislative session. And Ellie and I thought as a way to kind of get us excited about that, and also just explore some of the current positions that the state league does have, it would be fun to have some table conversation around these positions. And so the online group, you can have your own little group. These positions that are on your table were taken from the Washington State League 2024-2025 program in action. We don't have an updated one yet, but it's forthcoming. And a couple of tables don't have the full printout. I felt like, you know, we probably wouldn't have time to go over every single one in each table. So what you have on your table is just an excerpt, but that's okay, because the point of this is really to get you thinking about the range of issues and the positions that the league has taken a stance on, and most importantly, to think about if there's something that we're currently doing in our local league that relates to one or more of these positions that you'd like us to see continue doing, or maybe there's an issue that is important to you and you feel like we could be doing something more at the local league level. So this is just kind of a chance for us to take a look at the range of positions that we have as the Washington State League. Just for those that prefer a little bit more detail, there is a full explanation of each one of these positions in the program in action. So what you have is just a very brief summary. And the left side of the column is the Washington State League position, and then there's corresponding national ones on the right-hand side. But for the purpose of this exercise, I would say just focus on the left-hand side, which is our state league, so it might be a little bit more specific to what is appropriate for the state. So I see here across our tables, we have a couple of people who are pretty involved in advocacy at the state level. So also like rely on them to provide some additional context, you know, some more information. And yeah, so just take 10 minutes or so in your groups. I'll answer questions in a minute, but take 10 minutes to look at some of those positions that are on your table. Again, each table has slightly different ones, and choose one or two to talk about and think through maybe a few things that you would recommend that we work on at the county level, or maybe just share with the group if you're already engaged in some of these, perhaps through a server core or through other means, share what you're doing as it relates to these positions. Any questions? We have one in the middle here. Two questions.
At the county level, are we gonna be able, our local league to have time with our legislators? I used to do that, and then last year we could not, it was only state level.
So we do have lobby day coming up, or lobby week, I think, in January. So, we'll have more information about that to share with all of you when that becomes available. There's also gonna be more information about what the state is doing with advocacy at the action workshop in 2 weeks on 15th. So this is just kind of to get us primed to talk about that, and just for those that maybe are new to the league or haven't been as engaged in the different like, range of issues that we work on, to realize that we have positions on topics more than just voting. So, yeah, we won't have a chance today to talk in detail about how we're speaking with our legislators, but that's to come. And did you have a?
Well, I wanted.
You've alluded to it, that the update is coming. I mean, I've read through this thing, I don't know how many times now. But just wanted to make note of a couple of state positions that are not included in the summary right now because they're in the new edition, and that's the elder care study that we did and the the welcoming immigrants, and that will be in the new study and also, or the new PIA. And to let you know that the local news position has been moved to the democracy representative government section of the PIA.
Great. So, yeah, talk about it for 10 minutes, to talk about kind of talking about it, and rely on people like Ann at your table who maybe have a little bit more information. And Janet, and yeah, so if there's someone at your table who does have a little bit more experience, now I can see. Yes, one more question? So PIA is permanent action, that's what this is derived from. So we'll put the link in the notes, as I mentioned, it hasn't been updated for this next session yet. So yeah, you just have an excerpt, but don't worry about it, because you just need to talk about 1 or 2 issues and your ideas for what we might do to think about that in Clark County and other local weeks. So yeah, we'll convene back together in about like 25 after.
So I've put a link to this document in the chat.
I couldn't get it though. I got an access denied message.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe there's something wrong with it. I can try again.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks.
I've called it up. I just wanted to put it in chat box too. Yeah.
So it's like right here. It's just pages 9.
Oh, just pages 9 through 30.
Yeah.
Well, I gave him the whole thing.
Well, it's fine, but you could like put in the chat, like put
Okay.
pages 9.
Just pages 9 through 13 is what we're gonna look at. And
Okay.
trying to get the link to work again. Let's see. See how this works. I didn't know how to do it. See if it does.
Do you normally do like a breakout group just for the 9 people, or
Usually we don't.
yeah, people are just kind of chilling for?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Well, at least they can take a look at the source file. But you should go for this group.
okay. So we're here we are. I'm not putting us in a breakout group, but so I'll just turn the volume down on the TV set so the whole room doesn't have to hear you. So we're pretty private now. 9 through 13, let's see. This document is available on your on the Washington League site, members, if you go to the members area. But you can see it's positions are brief, our positions in brief, it says. Obviously, you can tell I wasn't ready for this part. So I apologize.
That's okay. I'm just so happy that you're willing to do this for us.
Well, at least you have a copy of it. If you can, if that link worked, did it work now? And then you can look at it at your leisure because it's gonna be looks like a lot of reading if you're not familiar with it yet. So, we wants to keep we want to keep our policies, our positions on these things up to date. National relations. This might be where we're supposed to start.
I got the document from the website, so.
Okay, I can't, I turned the TV sound way down, so I couldn't hear. We have some ideas about how to upgrade our whole audio visual scene here, but we're still looking at it. And the captions that you see are listening to the room also, because that's how we have it set up. So that might be kind of confusing. The other problem you Zoomers have is that you didn't get to taste the treats that Mimi brought. They're really good. I went and had one.
I'm very sorry I missed that.
Yeah. Well, actually, we bought them at Costco. They were called breakfast bars, but they're pretty big. If so, Mimi cut them into thirds, I think.
So, which pages are we talking about?
9 through 13 is what I was told. And
Yeah,
there's
I
some
think,
spaces, but I believe what it really is the start where it says government.
okay.
Which might actually show as page 15 or so on your document.
Government, okay, I'm there, and it looks like page 12 on the document I have.
Okay.
Let me
Yeah,
see
it
if it's
says on
the
the bottom, it
same.
says page 12 and then but it's page 15 of the
Yeah, of the whole
PDF.
document.
Yeah, so it's,
Yeah, okay.
I'm pretty sure
And
this is,
it's,
I kind of missed what we're supposed to be doing, and I apologize for that too. But the idea was to share this and talk about league positions. Do you have any comments or questions? We'll do our best. I think I just have Pat, Chor, and Tricia here. Tricia, you're gonna be a presenter, right? And Henry Marion is a guest.
Yes, I'm here to present, and I'm sorry I missed out on the treats as well.
Yeah, well, are you in Pullman?
I am, yeah. I
Okay.
sure-
Well, we spent a whole lot of time in the Tri-Cities. I graduated from WSU, but not in Pullman. I graduated at the Tri-Cities branch.
Tri-Cities, okay.
Yeah,
Well, you can still say go Cougs.
I still do. I'm
Okay, all
still
right,
wear the cap.
very good.
I was only 47 years old when I graduated.
Oh, wow, well, think of the wisdom that those students in class with you gained.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I enjoyed the whole thing, really.
Well, good for you for tackling it later on.
My wife Mimi was a big part of that. She wouldn't let me quit.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
We just happened to be on the subject of education on this page.
And might be new batteries. That's what I said.
Are we going as far as the position on privatization?
Okay, let's do that.
That's an interesting one. Since I've never seen any government function that was privatized very successfully. Has anyone else?
Let's see. It seems to me like what happens when government functions are privatized is that it just adds a middleman or a bunch of middle persons to scrape off some of the cash as it floats by.
Yeah,
That's my own opinion.
I agree. I think it's especially interesting when, I'm not sure this is exactly privatization, but the industries, well, Boeing is a good example. They're allowed to regulate themselves, which is pretty disturbing, actually.
Well, I worked in the nuclear power industry and they have both, right? We have government regulation, but we did a lot of regulation ourselves so we could make sure the government didn't have too much work to do.
And it's probably more effective that way.
Yeah.
But it sounded like at the time that Boeing was going through the whole scandal, it sounded like nobody was paying too much attention, nobody from the government, but I could be wrong about that.
Oh, excuse me, Pat. It looks like we're.
With no microphones, so we'll start our voices.
Oh.
Anyone wants to do a brief share of what they discussed in the table, maybe something you learned or an idea that your group came up with about engaging in these positions? I know it's kind of intimidating yelling too, so if you don't want to share out, that's okay, but I'd love to have maybe one or two groups explain what they talked about, maybe you share an idea. Please, Scott.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe one thing, I'll pick this game up.
Yeah, use outdoor voice, scream, okay. So just the general idea of, is it appropriate for the league to participate in these action items in the first place? And maintain our nonpartisan status? Would that be confusing to people? It's lobbying for things other than voting rights. Yeah, coverage. Yeah, that's fine. Well, and I think. And then we also had, we moved on from there to the ideas around guns and especially the legal community has thoughts on that.
Yep,
And,
speak up.
the idea of incentive to vote. Incentive to vote.
Thank you.
Right.
No, that was kind of it, that we had a real discussion about the difference between advocacy and our nonpartisan status. Because it could be construed that we're aligning ourselves more with one party than the other.
Yes.
And I think that's just a matter of the period that we're in, than anything else.
Does anyone maybe want to provide a reflection on that? I know it's something we've been talking about this entire year, actually. And yeah.
I would say if you go back, and look at the position, many of the positions we have were taken in '70s and '4. And I always like to think that the political parties are aligning with us.
Well, my experience was I was introduced to League because I was working on the Equal Rights Amendment with National Organization for Women and EPW and AAUW. And then someone said.
Sorry, folks, we
"You
lost our
must become
speaker,
a
our,
league."
electrical speaker.
That Franklin County League. Over half our members at the time were Republicans, so I never saw this as any kind of problem. It's like what, because we deal with consensus. What is the consensus about? What is good for the nation? And it isn't looking at it through a partisan lens. It's looking at it through the eyes of various women from different, we have a lot of scientists, a lot of engineers, women who came from non-traditional jobs and things. And it's like, that's why I always have had such a positive view. And if people are thinking right now, we're aligned with one party and not the other, it's because that other party has moved away. The women I worked with in the 80s and the 90s and 2000s. I don't know where they are right now because we moved over here, but I assume that if they're looking impartially at the issues, their responses would still be pretty much the same. I think it's not our responsibility what other people think, as long as we are able to say, no, we're nonpartisan because of this.
We need one more table. Okay, you're gonna have to really speak up.
Yeah, and I haven't heard everything very entirely, so I apologize. But I have always thought of the league as being progressive, which to me means we care about the common good. We want to make things better for everyone. That does not stop at voting, although that's an important piece of stuff. It's social stuff. It's do people have enough to eat? It's just the whole thing. Are we taking care of our children, which was a big topic of discussion here. People don't have enough to eat. And I'm sorry that that's a concern of illegal voters in my mind, because that's a common good issue. There are many others like that aren't expressly connected with voting. They're connected to our country. They're connected to patriotism. They're connected to how we want things to be for everybody in our country.
Can I respond earlier?
Just
I think the constitutional language is something about the common good.
So I'm sorry I didn't have a mic because folks on Zoom can't hear, and I think this was a rich conversation to just help us be aware that does have positions on a variety beyond just voting. And so
Will we
I encourage you to dig into that. It was interesting thinking about at the state level.
Okay.
Legislators, please do sign up for the action workshop on November 15th.
Sorry, folks, we lost our mic. That's what happened. So,
Website. Mark your calendars for that, and we'll continue to discuss our positions as they evolve. So we really want to updated program in action for this next session. We'll have another opportunity to continue to have these conversations about how we maintain our nonpartisanship and also acknowledge that we take positions on the issue. So that concludes my little section, and Ellie has some announcements. Hopefully we have Trisha, yes, online, and we'll just conclude with a brief presentation and a couple of now.
Okay, Trisha Grantham is from Trisha Grantham is going to do a presentation on the state league. Trisha, why don't you take over?
Yeah, I am trying to increase my volume here.
Oh, yeah.
I'm having trouble hearing you all.
That's the problem we have. Yes, we know that we'll be able to hear you just
Okay.
fine, and we'll yell when we're trying to
Okay,
talk with you.
great. That sounds fine. Am I coming across okay? Can you hear me?
Can everybody hear that? I can turn it up.
Okay. So, my name is Trisha Grantham, as introduced, and I'm very pleased to be with you this morning. As I told Henry and Pat, I was sorry to miss the treats, but that's what happens on Zoom. But anyway, I am a member of the Pullman League, and I serve on the executive committee with the Pullman Group. And I'm also currently serving on the state nominating committee. So it's with that hat that I come to you this morning. And we have started our process to identify people across the state that are part of the local leagues who may want to join the state board. And we currently, for starting in 2026, we have, let's see, 6 positions that we need to fill. And one of them is of the first vice president. The other officer would be the treasurer for the 50C4 part of the organization, which is the advocacy arm of the league. And then we have 4 board members, slots that we need to fill. And as you probably do in your own league, there's a rotating way that we fill these positions. So this year we have 6 to fill. I believe next year it'll be 7, or for 2027. So we have our work to do. And so what we've been doing is we've been visiting with the leagues across the state. There are 5 committee members. And I don't know, Henry, if you want to start showing slides, or if you don't, I'll just keep talking.
Oh, you have some slides. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Should have been
Yeah, and if they
Nominating-
don't come up easily, it's okay.
Nominating committee, correct? Or is it the I-126 one?
No, it'd be the nominating committee.
Okay, we'll get you. I got you here. Hang on a second.
And then I can just walk through the slides fairly quickly that way, and then show you the website. Yep, the PowerPoint. There it is.
I don't see where it went.
Yeah, on my screen, it's highlighted in gray.
Yeah, I've got to go find it again. Hang on a second. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So I'll just keep talking until it pops up. So there are five committee members. 2 of our members are currently state leagues board members. So their perspective has been super helpful as we got started with this process. Three of us are, involved in our local leagues to one extent or another. So here is the beginning of the PowerPoint that you can find on our webpage, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So there we are with our cape, our capes, Defenders of Democracy. And the next slide, please. So here are the members of our committee that have been working since the very beginning of October. We meet twice a month. And as I mentioned earlier, we each took 4 leagues to contact. And I happened to select Clark County, and I have 3 other leagues that I have been in contact with and done a similar presentation with them. Our other members likewise. They had their own 4 leagues to present to, and people have been really gracious about having us come to their meetings, and I really, really appreciate having time with you all today. Next slide. So just to repeat, the fact that some of you probably already know all this is the fact we do have 2 governing boards, each with 12 members, and that's the 501c4 board and then the 501c3 board, which is the education fund. That is the one, if you contribute to, there is some tax advantage to that. So the directors, those 12 members do serve on both boards. And except they each have a unique treasurer. So we are needing to recruit someone for the 501c4 board treasury position. And I believe, and if there's anyone on the board in this group, I should have asked that first. I believe they meet, the boards meet on the same day, and it's pretty much a day-long meeting, is my understanding. So we will be recruiting all 6 of those members, 4 of those being, as I said, board members, and they will serve 2-year terms. That is the obligation if you are selected. Next slide, please. So again, those are the positions that comprise the board. And we're looking for that first vice president and then the treasurer for 501c4, and then in our case, 4 directors this year, or for 2026, I should say. Next slide. So this is another picture of the slate, or the people who do serve as officers. And what I've learned through this process is the president actually recommends who will sit on the executive committee. But typically it is the officers who serve on the executive committee, and the board consists of the officers and the directors. Next slide. So here's kind of the challenging part, and probably the exciting part is as you assume a position as a board member, you choose a portfolio. And you can see the list of possible subject matter. Advocacy, certainly voter services, communication, membership, all of those are possibilities. And I do believe that the new board members will sit down and negotiate with the president which of those portfolios they really want to take charge of, and that they would share that that issue area, and then recruit committee members. That's another assumption I'm making. This PowerPoint doesn't really address that. One of our board members is an event planning chair. So it's been interesting or one of our committee members, I should say. It's been good to hear from Angela how that looks as a portfolio, responsible for a portfolio. So there's those opportunities there. Many of them probably overlap with what you do within your own league, I'm guessing. So there would be some connection there. Next slide, please. All right, that is a repeat of what I've already said, the vacancies that we're hoping to fill. in 2026. All right, next slide. So here's our timetable, and we are in the first module of the timetable. We are meeting with local leagues. We're soliciting applications. I actually have, in my work with the leagues, I have 2 people that are interested, may or may not pursue it, but they're interested. So that's always a good sign. And then, as you probably have already received from your own league, there is a whole a meet and greet session. The first one comes up this Wednesday. And they're in further down. In fact, I'll show you where that is. It's not on this PowerPoint, but it'll come up later. The first one is November 12th, and it begins at 6:30, and they believe it'll last until 8. And that is a way to get questions answered. You will see all the information that will appear on the website page of the nominating committee. Hopefully it'll respond to a lot of questions that people may have as they consider a board position. And then our deadline for applications is January 5th of 2026. Then interviews will be conducted those first 2 months of the year. And then the slate will be announced 40 days prior to our council meeting, which I do believe is in Lacey this year, that first week of June. And then, as you may recall, that the election does occur at the council event. So that's our work cut out for us right there to meet those deadlines and get the work done. Next slide. So whom would make a good board member? What kinds of qualifications would we looking for? Well, first of all, I want to say that you do need to be a league member. That's one qualification that's not listed here, but it's more in terms of what's important to you, what activities have you committed yourself to, what's your passion, even more importantly, your commitment to the league. And just if you have learned, certainly through a local league, you do learn to be a team player. I mean, that's how things get done. And, just to be able to capitalize on everyone's skills and backgrounds, things that you've been doing perhaps in a volunteer or professional capacity, bring those to the league. I mean, there probably is a slot that could really use those skill sets. And again, just working on things that you've already committed to in your life that would benefit the league in terms of your interests and your volunteer experience. Next slide. So why should you apply? Well, let's say you've been working with your local league and it's gone well for you, you're energized, and you feel like, well, I feel like maybe I need to kick it up a level and to work with other people from around the state to get things done. That is not to say you don't get things done in your local league, because I know all the local leagues get a lot done. But it's just if you want to have that extra level of influence and be able to work with other people on the board, that's one opportunity to continue to work on your leadership skills and then help really design the future for the league, be in a position to do that. And then I think there is some concern that has been shared that, well, if you spend 2 years with the state league, what happens with your involvement with the local league? Well, some board members choose to stay involved with their local league. Others will come back with a brand new set of skills, perhaps, or enhanced skills from their time on the state league. So that would be the hope, is you would increase your knowledge base and bring that back to your local league at the end of your term. Next slide. So you can apply online. There is an application, or you can contact one of the nominating committee members that were listed earlier on the slides. And ask any questions, but I think the meet and greet that happens on Wednesday and the second one is in December. The second meet and greet is December 6th. That's on a Saturday, 10:30 in the morning and noon. So you have two choices there. And there's a QR code there that will bring you to the application process. So there's several different ways you can apply if this sounds like something you want to pursue. Next.
Still there?
Yep. Okay. There it is. So, can you click, Henry, can you click on the website and then I can show what our page looks like, get people familiar with that. So if you go into the league site and you punch in, or just actually just in your browser, put in see if I can get this right, LWVWA, and then .org, and then it's / nominating -committee. And that will bring you to this page. And I don't know if someone wants to put that in your chat, that would be great. So that's a good way to find it quickly, this page. So what's on this page is a lot. The board application itself. Let's say you know of someone within your own league or even another league that you think would just be just a really good candidate, a strong candidate. You can recommend that person. Of course, we ask that you get their permission first. That's could be a little awkward if that doesn't happen. And then the description of the board position. And we just updated that. So it is current. And it is considerable and it's quite comprehensive. It's a time commitment, I won't kid you about that. It really is. And then the other thing that was just updated was the frequently asked questions. And there are a lot of those there. So that would be great to maybe preview before either of the meet and greet sessions. And then if those don't get acknowledged, or if you still have questions, then they can certainly come up during those sessions. So if you just click on those boxes, all those things will come up. And if you want to click on one and see if, just to show how that works. Yep. There, it's small print, is the description for the position of a board member. So that will give you kind of bullet point by bullet point what that involves. So that's basically what you'll find. And then if you can scroll down a little further, Henry, I'll show you the rest of it we've covered in terms of the timeline. If you haven't already registered for one of the meet and greets, you can do so there on the blue buttons that says register, and they do want you to do that for those. And then the other documents that are below that are just a lot more resources that are available, bylaws and the strategic objectives, and just maybe even what you're addressing this morning with your work at your meeting. So it's really quite robust in terms of the information you can get. Would love it for any and all of you to consider a position on the board. I know it's a big ask, and we certainly want you to stay connected with your local league as much as you possibly can. So are there any questions?
Tricia,
Yes.
this is Ellie.
Hi, Ellie.
Thank you so much for this presentation. We're running short on time. And so I think if people can reach out to you, that
Yes,
will be what works at this point.
that's fine. And either through, actually, I need to change the email because I haven't been able to make the league email work. So can I send that? How do you want me to do that, Ellie?
Put it in the chat. Put it in the chat,
Okay,
and
I'll do
then we'll
that.
have it and be able to share it.
Okay, very good. And you got my phone number, so
Yes.
either one works. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tricia.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Nancy pulled out our old setup.
Awesome.
So we might have a mic. Yes.
You want to do, oh, you can do it, because
Okay.
my voice doesn't carry very well with this one. All right. Test.
Okay. Oh, good. Thank you, Nancy, to the rescue. Okay, because Ellie said she thought I had the louder of the two voices, and I've never been told I have a loud voice, so yes, this is great. So we will get all of these details out to you via the notes, just to make sure. I know there were a lot of PowerPoint links shared, lots of contact information, so we'll make sure, yeah, that's included, so that you can follow up if you're interested in that. Just a couple of announcements before I'll hand it over to Teresa and Nancy. So reminder about two really important events on November 11th, or sorry, 11/15. So November 15th in 2 weeks. One is the action workshop, which we've talked about. The link is on the member calendar. You can sign up there. That is 9 to 4 and it's virtual. And then there's also something called the Whole Washington Workshop. So the league is working with them to co-host an event dedicated to healthcare justice in Washington state. So if you'd like to learn more about that, they have warmly invited us to this workshop from 12 to 3. It's in Vancouver, it's in person. The information is on our member calendar. So that is it for me. And Teresa, if you'd like to give a civics update, we can do that for a few minutes, and then Nancy.
Just a couple of things. A lot of you have gone out and been a participant in the career and counseling fairs that have been going on throughout the county. Sarah Bennett has been in charge of that this year. I just want to do a big thank you. I don't even know how many schools. I know not quite as many as last year, but anyway, also Rachel and I went and visited Gila High and did the very first misinformation. What was the name of it?
I don't remember. I think it's like media and news literacy or something.
Yeah. So we did that with a bunch of 10th graders. And it went reasonably well. We think we can learn more from it. And also there's 2 other high schools that are, we have other people going to them. Tracy Riley Kelly is going to VSAA in December, and I don't remember what her topic is, and then Mary Schick is going to Union sometime in the next couple of weeks, and she's using the PowerPoint that we developed. So the great thing is that there are schools out there that are interested in us coming, and then I met a teacher. I have a little post-it note there at one of the counseling fairs, and she's interested, so I just need to contact her and work that out. So that's one thing. The second thing is, last year we did You Can Run for Office, and I really wanted to partner with the library district because it gives us more PR. And that is now in the works. It's going to be on a Sunday, unfortunately, because they do a lot of tax help from January or from February through April. So it'll be Sunday at the Vancouver Community Library from 1 to 3, and that's about as much as we've got so far. Tried to hit them up for food, because I asked for everything. They won't give us food, so we'll need to provide food for that. And I hope that you'll consider participating. It was very successful last year. I wanted to use their room because it's bigger, and hopefully we'll get more people. And Cynthia looks like she has a question. March 8th. I thought I said that. Sorry, March 8th, 1 to 3. We want to do that before people start filing for office. I think that's all. We are also hoping to do another Speak Up School, but we haven't scheduled that yet. So stay tuned. We welcome everybody's participation. Our radio show. Yeah, we just did the redistricting. I can't say that word with Ann Murphy and Irene Finley. I thought I saw Irene here. Yeah. And just so we do those shows several weeks ago, and then I immediately forgot about them. And then they come out live on the first Tuesday from 8:15 to 8:45. But it's like a podcast. So then there's a link. If you just Google Citizen 411, you can listen to us and listen to Ann and Irene. And then next month we are meeting with NAACP. So
And that's in a couple weeks when we record that show.
Thanks. I just wanted to give a shout out for Coffee with the League. This last Monday was fantastic. We had a great group. The conversations, I mean, I went home and I was so energized. It was marvelous. We've had new members, I think, at every Coffee with the League. So I encourage you, if you can attend, this next month, December, will be the first at Thatcher's Coffee, which is down off Highway 14. We are looking for different avenues. We want to make sure that everyone in the county is able to attend. And we are still looking for an appropriate spot in East County, either Camas or Washougal, that has more than, 5 chairs. And there was talk in the beginning of, well, what about in the evenings? We could meet it at a brewery or a winery or something. And we would love to do that. We just need to have some feedback if people really want to do that. Next thing I want to mention is the Observer Corps. We just elected a charter commission beginning in January. That's when their work starts, and we could really use some help in watching the Observer Corps. The comp plan update is nearing the final months. That's very important. They just released an ag study. The city of Vancouver just released their preferred land use map. All those things are really, really important to us in our daily lives. They affect us where we live. And so if you'd like to, if you want to spend time at home and contribute to the league, the Observer Corps is a really good place. And then Ann Murphy has something that she wanted to share.
Thanks, Nancy. I just wanted to address the concern this table had a little earlier about just being about voting rights. And just so that you all go back into the history of the league, once we became a league, their very first business was dealing with the Shepherd-Towner Act, which was dealing with child labor and maternity issues, all of which then the league led a delegation that went to Hoover to talk about it. It actually wound up being revived as part of Social Security in 1935. So you can see that history of social issues goes way back for the league. And it addresses what Susan brought up about being progressive for all of society. Thank you.
December 1st, 9 a.m. Thatcher's Coffee.
All right.
We moved it from 9:30 to see if it would be more receptive, and we got a bigger crowd. So we're open to adjustments. Just let us know.
Great, thanks. Yeah, it's nice to end, I think, on a high note, just talking about all of the wonderful things we're doing in the community and, the coffee chat. So thanks for those updates. And that is all for the meeting today. If you have a little bit of extra time, it'd be great to just get some help putting the chairs back around the table, putting the room in order. And thank you all very much for showing up today and for the good conversation.